Welcome back to another episode of Think on These Things. My name's Adam McClendon. We are journeying through the scriptures as we read the Bible this year. And here we are, we're getting deep into the year, and I hope you're still joining us. If you just now connected with us and you want to begin to hop in and finish the year strong, please click on the links below and you can find and follow our Bible reading plan. Well, this week, one of the many passages that we were able and fortunate enough to read was Titus. Now, Titus is a beautiful book about the holiness of God, but one of the things I want to remind us is chapter and verse divisions were not in the original Bible. It wasn't in the original manuscripts that we had. That was added way later. And sometimes those chapter divisions are very helpful for us, not only to find them in a church service, but also just to remember where we were in our reading. But sometimes they break up a train of thought as the writer was writing. And so I want to begin at the very end of chapter 2 and then follow on to chapter 3. The writer there says, declare these things in verse 15, exhort and rebuke with all authority. So he's challenging Titus to exercise some pastoral or elder, ecclesiological, if I'm going to use a big word, authority over those in the congregation. And notice though the next thing he tells him, let no one disregard you. All right, so all that's done with everything he said and everything he's about to say. And then in verse 1 of chapter 3, with that type of authority, he says this, remind them, those under your teaching, under your care, those in the church, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities. Now, this is profound. As we are entering into a heavy political season, I think this is a helpful word to us. It's a helpful word to me. I am to be submissive to rulers and authorities that God, in his divine ordaining providence and sovereignty, has allowed to be elected and placed in positions of power. And while those rulers and authorities are responsible and they are the ones who are culpable for the actions and the decisions and the policies and everything else, God is still sovereign over that process. And I trust him. And they are responsible, those rulers, of using their platform and their position for good. However, God is the sovereign one. And because of my understanding of that, I am to exercise submission to those rulers and authorities so long as, now here's the key, they are not asking me to sin against God. Now, I have to submit to the highest authority, which is God. But unless they're asking me to sin against God, I am to submit and follow their leadership. He goes on, though, it gets more profound. He says, remind them to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, speak evil of no one. Man, this is convicting, especially when we think about some of our tweets or social media posts or something on Threads or what I put on Instagram or Facebook or whatever your social media of choice, or maybe it's just something I say about someone standing in line at the grocery store. He says to avoid quarreling. He says to be gentle. Gentleness is not something that we highly value in our society, but I am reminded by reading this text that God highly values gentle servants who live with great knowledge of his authority, and they live in such a way that magnifies his grace and compassion to the world. This is such an important attribute to God. It's not only listed among the fruit of the spirits, where he gives the 9 fruit of the spirits there in Galatians 5. It's also listed among the chief characteristics and requirements for someone to serve in the office of elder or overseer over God's church. That's pretty significant. He tells them not to be brawlers and to be gentle. There's this disposition among the leaders in God's church that are not to be unique to them, but it's to be a characteristic found in every one of Christ's followers. But it is one of those attributes that must be evident in our leaders. And yet what I find often is we admire and clamor towards the leaders that are the most bombastic and aggressive and critical, and they thunder in the pulpits, often in a way that tears people down and doesn't build them up. And yet God's telling us that we are to be gentle, even in the instances where we have to oppose political authorities. He finishes up and he says, show perfect courtesy to all people. Not, as James says, just to the wealthy and the important and those filled with power and prominence and those who have the right position, but we are courteous towards everyone we interact. And now he's going to tell us why. Look at chapter 3, verse 3. He says, for we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, hated by others and hating one another. But when the goodness and loving kindness of our God and Savior appeared, he saved us. How? Not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his mercy. So the two questions that's been pressing upon me as I read this is one, will I submit to God's authority in this text, even beyond my own cultural preferences and my own pastoral traditions? Am I willing to say, God, I'm going to submit to your word, even though it doesn't fit the narrative of my culture? And the second question I've been asking is, will I show mercy to others that's commensurate to the mercy I've been shown by God? Wow. I don't know about you, but that's convicting to me. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Think on These Things. If you would like to find out more about the John W. Rawlings School of Divinity, please check us out at www.liberty.edu/divinity. Thank you for joining us this week.